Hello, you are listening to the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. I'm your host, Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 best-selling author. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter and find out more about how you can heal yourself naturally. Now, our guest today, Jane Bernard, is an expert in sensual thinking, and you can find out more on her website, sensualthinking.com. Welcome, Jane Bernard.
Thank you, Catherine. It's a pleasure to be here.
So, Jane, what exactly is sensual thinking?
Sensual thinking is using all 6 senses to understand how things come together. Because we not only see, hear, taste, touch, and smell, we sense things like timing and purpose and direction. And when we use all of our senses together, we also incorporate what we feel in our heart and what we know from experience, because we're one body. It's a holistic way of thinking. So sensual thinking is essentially thinking with your senses, which is being present, and feeling with your mind, which is tuning into energy around you, like determination or curiosity or truth.
Very interesting. Now, one of my 8 books is called Unlimited Intuition Now, and being a medical intuitive healer, I use my intuition in my work. And the way I look at things when we're talking about specifically psychic gifts, or another way for it, I think about it, is soul guidance, is that there's 4 primary psychic gifts. The claircognizance, which is psychic knowing, that's my primary gift.
Right.
Clairsentience, which is psychic feeling, which is what you seem to be talking about, the feeling and feeling the energy. Clairvoyance, which is psychic vision. And finally, clairaudience, which is the reception of information as sound and words.
Well,
so everyone does what they do, and we all have a way of thinking. So tell me more about, how did you develop this idea about sensual thinking?
Well, I'm sorry about the background. This is New York. Sensual thinking is not just a feeling, it is knowing. And it is not even just knowing, it's knowing and feeling and understanding. It's all of the things that you're talking about rolled into one. And I believe that the way that we can use sensual thinking to really understand life is to start with our senses, because the thing about what I'm talking about is being in sync with change. And that is the hardest thing right now, because there's so much change going on all around us every day. So what I recommend for connecting with sensual thinking is what I call intuitive eating, which is eating not only using your 5 senses to see, hear, taste, touch, and smell what you're eating, but also to use your 6th sense to say, well, does this, be curious, and curiosity is intuitive. So I would say, look at your food, and then to be prudent and say, well, how much is this? Is this good for me or not? And be dignified and say, well, I feel good about myself when I eat this much. And the reason why I recommend eating is because eating is part of our survival instinct. And intuition is part of our survival instinct. And what I'm advocating is actually a whole new way of using the brain. Because what we sense informs our brain and focuses our mind. And I believe we can't really train our brain with our brain, but we can train our mind. We can train ourselves to think differently by what excites us. It's the experiences that have the most profound impact on how we reason are ones that are sensual, whether they're exciting, whether they're about love, whether they're fear. Those are all the things that impact us. So by eating every day using what I call intuitive tools, which are all things we sense. They're courage, curiosity, dignity, determination, prudence, patience, foresight, self-discipline, and grace. I think I skipped one, tenacity and grace. By using them in our eating, we train our mind to use them in other situations, especially when we're stressed. And the thing about using these tools when we eat, including tasting our food and smelling it, is we connect our mind with our body. And also, because we eat every day, we practice every single day. So it's a no-brainer. If you eat every day and you really savor your food, you are connecting your mind with your body, and you're also doing something vitally important in these times, which is you're relaxing. Because when you're really tasting what you eat, you leave your intellect and you enter a realm of the sensual. And when you leave your intellect, even if it's for 15 seconds, it gives your mind time to reboot. And that's what we need, because when change is happening so rapidly all around us, we get lost in the shuffle. And when we get lost in the shuffle, we lose touch with context. And when we don't have context, we can't see where things are coming from. We're not clear about where we're going, and we may not achieve what we want.
Now, since you brought up intuitive eating, and I want to get back to sensual thinking,
Yeah.
talking about intuitive eating as a tool to help us open this gift,
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to share for our audience some simple things that you can do to get more in tune with yourself when you're eating.
Great.
So a simple thing to do, and I'm going to explain for our audience now, Jane. A simple thing to do is use your body like a pendulum. So the first thing you want to do is get neutral, and there's a lot of ways to get neutral. But even if you just set your intention to be in neutral, and you can hold any food to your thymus gland. What is your thymus gland? Right in the center of your chest. And just by holding it there, you can actually feel whether it strengthens you or weakens you. So your body may sort of move towards the food, your body may move away from your food, or you may simply, literally, by holding it next to you, have a sensory awareness of how the energy of that food is going to affect you. Now, another thing that you can do is when you're sitting down at the table and you're trying to decide, let's say there's a number of dishes on the table and you're trying to decide what to eat, you can use, once again, even while sitting, you can use your body like a pendulum and notice what you're naturally drawn to, what you naturally move away from. Another thing to do, you can use your whole body as a pendulum. Another thing that you can do is use your head, like literally your head as a pendulum. So if you think about your body almost like a ballpoint pen and your head as a ball on the top of it, you can use your head and say, show me a yes, show me a no. And again, you can ask your spiritual guides to, just say, hey, make this so clear and easy, even I can understand. And frequently a yes is forward and a no is back. But if you're really paying attention to yourself, your yes and no could also be side to side. It could be right or left. So you calibrate a yes or no, and then notice what strengthens you. The other thing is, while we're eating, a lot of us are very disconnected while we're eating. And that happens when we're on the cell phone, we're on the computer, we're reading a book, we're multitasking. But when you're eating, you can also pay attention to how the food is making you feel. Are you uplifted? And what's interesting, we're talking about sensual thinking. When you really think about food, food is more than just the chemistry. Food is just more than just the proteins and the carbohydrates and the fats and so on. when you're eating a food, you're also literally absorbing the energy of the people who created that food, the chefs in the kitchen, and the people that you're eating with. So sometimes who are, especially my clairsentient clients, my clients who are high in psychic feeling, they're reacting in addition to the gluten and the glyphosate and all these other things, they're also really reacting to the energy of the food. And that may be the energy of the people around you, and that could also include your own feelings. So a lot of my clairsentient clients, especially if they have GI problems, I tell them, do not eat until you are calmed down. So there's some simple ways that you can connect your intuition while you're eating. So Jane, let's go back to you in sensual thinking. How did you come up with the idea for sensual thinking? What led you to develop this concept?
Well, that's a great question. What led me to two things. First of all, I agree with what you said in many ways. I often talk about feeding social, emotional, physical, and spiritual hunger when we eat. But what led me to come up with the concept of sensual thinking is that I am trained, I worked with severely autistic children a long time ago. And when I was working with them, what I discovered is the only way that we could really get through to them, these were children who wouldn't give eye contact, they were violent, they were really distressed, was through their senses. And subsequently, I went through a really rough patch in a marriage, and I was feeling no passion. And I thought, oh my God, what is life without passion? It's zip for me. So I decided, based on my experience with autistic kids, that I would, for an hour every day, only write what I could see, hear, taste, touch, or smell, which was quite a discipline. And what I discovered is that actually I had 6 senses. And the 6th sense is intuition. And it works the way your palm works with your hand. Like your 5 fingers are your 5 senses, and your palm connects them. So like if we hurt our palm, we can't pick up a glass of water. And the other thing that's interesting is the way the 5 fingers and the palm work is that the fingers are connected to the mind and the heart with the palm. So that is how I came up with the concept of sensual thinking. And because my background is in philosophy and special education, I wasn't approaching it as you do from a very biological, medical perspective. I was really approaching it from more of a psychological and spiritual perspective. And so sensual thinking evolved, and I wrote a book called Fine Tuning, which is a very simple book that you can just open to any page. But as a result of writing Fine Tuning, I was actually asked to write about intuitive eating. And so I worked with people who were dieting for 2 years, and I came up with the 10 tools that I mentioned earlier. And I arranged for them to be able to use these tools when they ate, to connect with what they sensed. And different interesting things happened. Like one woman, for example, realized that what made her agitated and needing to eat was every time her husband talked about money at the dinner table. So she asked him not to do this, and it changed everything. Other people found that because they were using dignity and tenacity when they ate, they had self-disciplined themselves unconsciously and given themselves inner power to sense kindness or to sense opportunities in other parts of their lives. So sensual thinking is really something that I also think has evolved more because of technology today. With computer technology, they keep saying how it's intuitive. Well, it's not intuitive. We're the ones who are intuitive. And one of the things that I love is I think of sensual thinking like search engine thinking. In the 20th century, the way, it evolved, everybody believed there was one right and one wrong and one way to do things. And now, because we have search engines, we know that there's almost endless ways of doing things and navigating life and change. But the thing about intuitive thinking is it's part of our survival instinct, and it always protects us, and it always guides us to be our highest potential, and it never tells us to do anything destructive. If you think you're getting that message, you're not paying attention. Also, the thing that's really cool about intuition, from my perspective, is that it has nothing to do with emotions. Emotional thinking is always a reaction to something that happened in the past. And when emotions drive us, we know we don't make our best decisions. So when you use your sixth sense with your other senses, not only do you become more aware of what's happening, but you also become aware of your own ability, which I believe everyone has, not especially gifted people, to sense kindness, or to sense an opportunity, or to sense when someone's lying to you. And that's very helpful for navigating the internet. When we go on Google and we're just looking around, there's only one way we know that we're going to push another button, because it doesn't feel right. So you have to understand, when you understand what you feel, it's not like an emotional feeling, it's an energy. And when you talked about a very physical energy. I thought it was so interesting, your pendulum concept and the thymus and all of that. That's incredible. I'm talking about an energy which is a synergy between the mind and the body. It's a kind of thing, I believe, that everything we sense kickstarts action in our mind. And that's what has the mind signal the body. And then our intuition has us take the next step. That's why we call it a gut feeling. It's always an urge to do something. There's nothing passive about sensuality.
And it's so interesting and fun, Jane Bernard, to talk to someone who, similar but different.
Right.
I know that you're not familiar with my work, but when I do a medical intuitive reading, I'm reading the physical body. You know what that is. That's what you might refer to as medical. Your bones, your organ systems, your muscles. Then there's the energy body. So I'm reading the chakras, the acupuncture meridians, and the breath. And then I'm reading the emotional body. What are the emotions that are going on, that are present? Then I'm reading the mind. What are the thoughts and beliefs? And finally, I'm reading the spiritual body. So again, you're not familiar with my work, but I just thought I would share that. So it's really a complete way of looking at a human being. So the way I think of a human is that there's 5 levels of you. There's a physical body, there's the energy body, which includes your chakras, your acupuncture systems, and the breath. Then there's the emotional body, which is the largest part of you, and emotions can shut down literally any process. And like Jane said, if you're in an emotional state, if you're highly emotional, you're not in neutral. And if you're not in neutral, you cannot truly access your soul guidance to its fullest ability. And then there's your mind, and then you have a soul, and you are actually a soul who has a body. So that's the way I look at people. But I agree with Jane in that it's all soul guidance. And what we're really talking about is different ways to get more in tune. So when I think about intuition, what that really means is being in tune. And you've got to be in tune with yourself first. And like Jane said, a great way to get in tune with yourself is in this eating process. Now let's go back to this eating process, because I think you and I would agree that so many people are out of tune when they're eating. And that's why we see so much illness. That's why we see so much obesity. Versus if you look at most wild animals, they're not overeating. If you put down some red dye, a cake with red dye number 5, they don't eat that stuff. So how is it that you think, or why do you think people get so disconnected from their sensual thinking in the eating process?
Actually, there's an easy answer. When I started, I've never dieted. So I read every diet book I could find before I wrote about intuitive eating. And three things just totally blew my mind. The first thing is they never talk about how you know when you're hungry. I mean, so how can you tell someone how to eat if you're not connecting them with their body? The second thing, which is connected with that, is how do you know when you're full? You know, so you don't know when you're satisfied and you don't know when you're hungry. What I realize is that dieting, which has been very prevalent for almost 100 years, cuts people up from the neck down. So when I went out with dieters for lunch and what you and I would call intuitive eaters for lunch, and the intuitive eaters would say, gee, I have a big dinner tonight, I'm going to eat less for lunch, or I just feel like I need protein. The dieters would say, oh, this is on my diet. That's what I'm going to have. And so what I learned is that the diet consciousness, which is pervasive everywhere, literally separates us from our body. And I think that's just such a crime because, you know, our body, as you pointed out, is the home of our soul and our heart. And what's so interesting, you know, there's been such a vast import on, oh, the mind is so important. In fact, you know, we can be brain dead and still be alive, but if your body is dead, you're dead. So when you learn, like intuitively, for me, I break down intuitive eating into the simplest possible way. I just say it's you eat for health and energy. So if you make all choices based on what feels healthy and gives you energy, that for me is enough to be an intuitive eater because I'm not intellectual behind it. But that is what the animals eat for. And that, if you do that, there's no pressure. There's no calories. There's no right or wrong. And the other thing is, like, for me, anyway, that answers your question.
Yeah, and you know, there again, you and I absolutely think alike. Now,
yes. Well, you know what I think, Catherine, just interrupt you for 1 second. I think there's many wonderful people all over the world that think alike, but every person hears differently. So the great gift is that all of us can unite together to share our thinking so that even if one person gets it, that's great. And then if another person gets it from someone else, that's great because we all want the same thing.
This is true. We all want to feel great and have great energy so we can fulfill our soul purpose. So I'm going to make a comment like Jane. I am a nutritionist and I use food healing very extensively in my work as a medical intuitive healer. But what I find, like Jane, people are disconnected. They're disconnected at so many levels. They're disconnected from their body. If you are in tune with your body and you feel uncomfortable, then that's a message. They're disconnected from their energy, or they're disconnected from their emotions, or they're suppressing or repressing their emotions. They're ignoring their soul guidance, and all this leads to dis-ease. Now, I myself am the same size that I was when I was 30. And the reason I know that, I have beautiful dresses that I bought when I was 30. I have this fabulous dress that I bought when I was 28 that I hang on to. It's pink taffeta. It's just too awesome. And but like Jane says, even after studying all this nutrition, and I can tell you all about it from a left brain's perspective, the way that I eat is that I tune in. What do I need in this moment? And like you said, you know, I was having dinner about a week ago and I had chocolate cheesecake for dessert. And, you know, you just reach a point where it's like, I'm actually full, right? And we can do the same thing, you know, when you're drinking alcohol or anything. So you can know when you really tune in and you know what it feels like to feel good and your primary goal is to feel as good as possible, and when you have that felt sense of what it feels to feel good, then you can just keep feeling good, and you will naturally be guided away from the Cheetos and the junk food.
Well, and if you eat those things, you're disrespecting yourself. And that's why I have people connect with dignity. Dignity is something, no matter whether you're a child or an old person, you feel in your heart. And you know if you have it. And if you feel that, if you look at a choice, your mental, emotional, intuitive connection will tell you right away that it feels good or it feels dignified, or you may feel sheepish or embarrassed, which means you're not honoring yourself. And life is too short to not honor yourself. And what's so interesting is that when you really are true to yourself and honor what makes you feel like healthy or dignified or just good, then other people who will start to honor you. Because when we disrespect our own selves by eating things that give us heartburn, or by avoiding the opportunity to sit down when we can, then people are going to take advantage of us. Because the fact is that when you don't really taste your food, in terms of sensual thinking, when you eat really fast and don't taste your food, it may be a signal that you don't make decisions based on knowing all the facts.
Very, very interesting. Yeah.
And also, like, if you just eat anything instead of really discriminating, well, this is what feels good to me, that may mean that you accept things or people into your life who really aren't good for you, because you settle for less than what you deserve. So these are ways that sensual eating with intuitive tools train your mind and bring into your life good health and continuity with your soul. Also, like, back to what you were saying about the soul, Catherine, I often think that intuition is the soul.
Yeah, I always say God only has to hit you over the head when you're not paying attention. And forgive me for even using that word, higher self, your higher power, but your soul is in charge, and you might as well pay attention, because your soul knows what it's about. Your soul knows what you're here to do. And the more in tune you are with your soul, not only are you going to feel good, and that's just something that's a news flash to a lot of people about how being in tune, it helps you to have this level of health. Now let's go back, because I know you've written several books, Jane. So can you tell our audience about your books and what they're all about?
Well, ultimately all of my books are about thinking with your senses and feeling with your mind. My first one is called Fine Tuning, which is an expression you've used several times. And each page is just like very short, a soundbite of insight, someone once said, and I've been quoting him ever since. And it's a kind of book where you just open to any page, and what you read helps you connect your body and your mind and your spirit by sensual thinking. They're just little insights. My second book was called Am I Really Hungry?, which is a 6 Sense diet. And it was based on all of those interviews with dieters. And the things that I also discovered, which I wrote about in the book, in this book, I write about what is frustration and how can you make it work for you? What is stress? And my favorite chapter is actually called The Lucky Ones, because I believe that anyone who has so much food that they need to diet is really lucky, because there's so much hunger in the world. And I have a chapter in that, and in another one of my books where I just list URLs that you can click anytime to feed people. It costs nothing. Mm-hmm. And I believe that gratitude and grace are intuitive tools that unite us and bring us to our greatest happiness. And this is ways that it can happen. Another book I wrote is called Knock Your Block Off, which is just an ebook, because I was doing a series of online lectures about how to beat writer's block. But somebody who got it recently wrote me an email and said, I never thought about it this way. And basically, I just do the same thing with writing as with eating, because our sensuality is part of our creativity. And life is creative. We're all creating our lives every minute of every day. So Knock Your Block Off is another book. And my most recent book, which I'm really so excited about, is called Lucid Living in the Virtual Age. And it's only 100 pages. And I really wrote it for people who want to make an impact in the world today by thinking differently. It's a book that teaches you how to use sensual thinking with the intuitive tools to train your brain to follow your passion. And I believe that everyone underneath it all is passionate about healing themselves and our planet and each other. I think that's really why we're here. We're here to help each other. And lucid living is so out of the box that you have to want to change the way you think if you're going to read it. And it's all about connecting with your passion through your senses.
I just really love what you're saying, Jane. And another thing, I want to go back to what you're talking about, gratitude. Because as I said, I'm a very highly trained nutritionist. And, there's a lot of value in educating people about, why diet soda is really not that great of an idea, and why eating too much sugar can make you feel bad. And why when they spray glyphosate on the wheat, that can affect your digestion.
Right.
There's a lot of value in this level of education. But when you get to the point that Jane and I are talking about, where you're literally tuning in, you will access your body's intelligence. And that's where we really have to learn how to trust our body and trust that your body actually knows best.
Well, the thing about that, Catherine, which I think is the coolest thing that people don't realize, it means you don't have to think. It means you can release stress in your mind by trusting your body. So it's a real liberation from the dogma of the 20th century.
Yeah. And, as I said, I'm the same size when I was 30. I don't count calories. I don't weigh my food. I'm not worried about how many grams of carbs or protein. There's no counting. I have way more important things to think about. But going back to gratitude, because I personally feel, I agree with you, I feel that the most important feeling that we all ought to have about food is gratitude, because 1 out of 7 people on the planet actually do not have enough to eat.
Right. That's why I write about hunger. And that's why I have the URLs in Lucid Living and Am I Really Hungry? In Lucid Living, I write about grace and gratitude, and I call them duct tape, because grace and gratitude can fix anything, no matter what your problem is. If right now you think about it from a perspective of what you have in your life that you can be grateful for, and you approach whoever is bugging you from a place of grace, you will discover that you have no problem.
I just love what you said. And again, here we are on the Natural Healing Show.
Right.
And gratitude is among the most high vibration energies there is. So for example, if I have a client who's depressed, I'm going to have them, before they go to sleep every night, make a list of 20 things they feel grateful for. Mm-hmm. So by writing it out by hand, you're getting in touch with the feeling of gratitude. And when you're literally feeling gratitude, you cannot feel depressed. And again, it just shifts your thinking about everything. Now, going back to sensual thinking,
yes.
How does sensual thinking help us to be more in the moment? Because I think that if we're really tuning into our senses, we're not in to worry, and we're not thinking about the future, we're not thinking about the past. So how does this help us to be more in the now?
Sensual thinking helps us to be more in the now in two ways. First of all, obviously, everything we sense is right in the present. But the thing that really helps us with sensual thinking is that we understand how it comes together. So we realize the impact of what we say, or we understand how we got where we are, and we have a clear sense of direction and timing for where we want to go. Having that grounds us to be really clear about what is valuable right now.
Now,
And all of that is something we sense, because if you're not in tune with what you sense, you are not present.
yeah. Now, I want to also talk about timing.
Okay.
Because a lot of times we may get guidance about something, but it's not for right now. I just want to tell a personal story. In the past couple of months, I really got the guidance that it was time for me to renovate my studio. Now, if you looked at my studio, I had clients that were like, there's nothing wrong with it. It's stupendous. It's gorgeous. It's beautiful. It's full of orchids and light and wonderful. But I just knew it was time. And so I started doing that, and I started, I ordered the paint and I ordered new carpet.
Mm-hmm.
And then my yoga classes, we had to move into my studio. And it was funny because I didn't know why, but I knew that the timing was now. So can you tell us more about how sensual thinking can get us more in tune with divine timing?
Well, if you mean by divine timing, just natural life timing, which I feel that anything alive is divine. So that's what works for me. Sensual thinking puts us in tune with timing, because we tune into rhythms and patterns in our lives and in our environments. And one of the tools that I talk about, which is actually the least popular one, is patience. And actually, patience is the key to satisfaction and self-respect, because timing is a personal thing, and your timing and my timing may not be the same, but we may have to meet on a certain plateau. So say you get there and I'm not there for 15 minutes, probably it's because there's something else that either you're early, or there's something else that I had to do that had nothing to do with you. People get upset about timing when they feel disrespected. But the fact of the matter is that timing is a mutual phenomena. But in terms of finding opportunities, that kind of timing, sensual thinking works that way because it keeps your mind open. Curiosity, which is an intuitive tool that we all use, simply means being open to the unexpected. That's what curiosity is. That's why kids find the darndest things and say amazing things, because they're totally curious. So when you are open to what is good in your body, what is good in your life, and what is good in your heart, and what you dream, then all of those things become powerful incentive and sources of insight for your timing. It's amazing, but you have great timing. You just have to trust yourself.
I love that. And when we trust ourselves, we trust our soul guidance. Now, tell us more about patience. I think I read recently that the average Western person has the attention span of a goldfish, 6 seconds. So to tell someone they have to be patient about anything, it's like, well, why? So how can we develop our patience, and why should we develop our patience?
To be impatient with yourself is to be totally disrespectful of messages you're getting from your heart and soul. So right there, that should light up some red flags. But there's 3 kinds of patience from my understanding. One is to be patient with yourself because you're trying. And it's a process of trial and error, and nobody knows everything. So allowing yourself to slow down or fall down and get up again. That's just part of life. And if you look at nature, we are part of nature, and nature is our greatest teacher. If you look at the way a flower grows or a tree grows, they don't always go straight up. Sometimes they have to bend. Well, so do we. So instant gratification is just a myth. The second kind of patience is what we were talking about before, which is patience with timing. Timing is out of our control, and as long as we do the right thing the right way for the right reason, we really don't have to worry about it. For example, if you need to catch an airplane and you go off and you go to the airport and it's canceled and you have a meeting on the other end, instead of like grumbling about what you can't change, the fact is that this is giving you time for something else. And if you trust the fact that you are where you belong, that God circled a place on the map, and that's where you are right now, even if you don't believe in God, you have to believe in yourself that you're there for a reason. Because the fact is the odds of being born are like millions to nothing. So you've already won a lottery. But when timing seems to go off, patience is what gives you an open mind to use your time wisely when you find it's there. And the third kind of patience is patience with others. I don't believe in the turn your other cheek. I believe that you have to honor and respect yourself. So you can be patient with others, and you should be patient, but only to a certain point. If you find that patience with others is demeaning to you, or in any way puts you in a place where you feel ill-dignified or uncomfortable, then it's wrong, and that's no longer patience. So the most important thing is to honor yourself. And the fact is that patience has many hidden forms. For example, everybody's had the experience of taking a shower and coming up with a brilliant idea. Now, why? The reason why is because when we're taking a shower, we're not thinking, we're just in the water and, cleaning up, and the mind wanders. Well, that's when your mind wanders, is when the best ideas come. So being patient with yourself by taking a minute to just space out, or just look at colors and scents and patterns around you, or just close your eyes for a minute, in a sense, is that patience, or is that just self-respect? Because our minds are just our hard drive, like they have spam and viruses. So sometimes you need to reboot, and patience is a reboot.
Now, one of the things that really helps me personally to be patient is to observe my orchids. So anybody who's been to my website, catherinecarrigan.com, or been to my studio, you've seen my beautiful orchids. Well, sometimes the most beautiful orchids, it looks like nothing's happening. Right now, I've got a fairy orchid blooming, a Paphiopedilum fairyana. Well, it was 2 years since the last time it bloomed. So if I wasn't a patient person, I could have just thrown it out and given up on it. But the orchids have really taught me that everyone and everything has its own timing.
Right, like day and night. And by the way, I've seen your orchids. They are exquisite. I have some of your pictures. Thank you. But that's a brilliant point about the orchid in the 2 years. There's day and night. We are part of nature. If you realize that you are part of cycles all around you, and that everyone is, then patience is not even an issue. It's part of going with the flow and being in tune with timing. For example, like if you're dancing, when you're dancing and you click into the rhythm and you're moving a certain way, you're not going to start moving really fast if it's slow music, because you're in the rhythm and you're in the beat. Well, every day is the music of your life. So tune into your music, feel the energy, and love it.
Beautiful words by Jane Bernard. And Jane, will you give everyone, as we close, your websites again?
Yes, sensualthinking.com is my website. And my blog is called intuitivescribe.blogspot.com.
Right. And you can find Jane's wonderful books on Amazon. You've been listening to Catherine Carrigan, medical intuitive healer and Amazon #1 bestselling author. And my book about intuition, Unlimited Intuition Now, is maybe my favorite book. I don't know. It's something that I really believe in. And like Jane, I feel that the more that we can teach people to be in tune, the healthier you're going to be, and it's going to be effortless. There's not all this worry and counting and worrying, am I eating the right thing? Am I doing the right thing? Because you'll know, because you'll feel good. So this is Catherine Carrigan for the Natural Healing Show for UK Health Radio. You can find out more about me and my work at catherinecarrigan.com and unlimitedenergynow.com. While you're there, sign up for my newsletter and find out even more about natural healing. Thanks for listening. And remember, when you use sensual thinking, you're going to be more in tune and healthier and happier.